Hello and welcome everyone to another Iceberg Interactive stream. My name is Bart and I'm a producer here at Iceberg Interactive, and joining me today is Sven Olsen from Ashdar Games. Hi Sven.
Hi Bart.
And so glad you could make it. So today we are showing Stars in Shadow, the game of course by Sven and Jim. And this is a 4X strategy game. It released in early access a while ago, and we just released a major update called the Stargate update. And we're going to be talking about that, showing you a bit of that. In the meantime, if you guys have any questions or comments regarding the game itself or the stream, just drop them in the chat and we'll try and address them as soon as we possibly can. So Sven, first of all, could you, for those viewers who've never actually heard of the game or seen anything of the game, could you give a very short introduction to what the game actually is?
Well, it's a classic 4X game. Very much in the mold of Master of Orion 2. So it's you're guiding one of I think we now have 7 different factions in their quest to conquer the galaxy, and yes, Bart is now showing you the different factions that you can play. It's a turn-based strategy game with turn-based tactics, which is still a bit unusual. We're a throwback in that respect.
Yes, so that's basically, that's pretty much exactly what it is. A turn-based game, turn-based combat. It is a 4X game. And I just loaded up a save, playing as one of the new factions. So we're playing the Ashdar Imperials. What type of faction are they, Sven? Could you tell us a bit about that?
Well, they're a faction that has the unusual property of starting with an ancient Stargate in orbit of their homeworld. This is something I think is interesting in games of this sort. Is you have these late game technologies, these high level technologies that can really alter the nature of gameplay, like a Stargate system. And if you give things like this to people early on, it very much changes the way the whole game plays out. And I'm not convinced it's entirely unbalanced. So the way we've done it with the Ashdar Imperials is there is a Stargate around their home planet, which gives them the ability to teleport instantly anywhere else in the galaxy, which is pretty awesome. But it does have its limits, because once you go through the gate, you have to use conventional drives to get back. So you can have a huge fleet, as I believe Bart now probably does have a huge fleet around Ashdar Prime, well, I can't quite see Bart's game. He may not be doing this particular strategy.
So yeah, I don't. My fleet is unfortunately not at my home world.
It's not at your home world right now. No, I'm not sure that's optimal.
I'm going to move there. Actually, I should be moving there. That's a good point.
Well, so it's one interesting trick. You'll notice it a lot more early game, because you'll be able to teleport out your scouts to anywhere in the galaxy. But the other thing that I can see now from this game is that the Ashdar Imperials, in addition to having this ancient gate which lets them teleport anywhere, they also have a very significant leg up on getting the conventional Stargate technology, which allows them to build gates around different worlds so they can simplify their logistics and just jump from one Stargate system to another, which, as you have a bigger and bigger empire, becomes more and more important. Also, in terms of getting your fleet back, if you use the ancient gate to jump somewhere. So Bart's been building, it looks like, several different modern Stargates, in addition to his ancient Stargate, and is now using them to jump his fleets around.
Yes, exactly. So we got the ancient Stargate right here at our home planet. So like Sven says, this one's actually special because you can teleport pretty much everywhere, or jump to pretty much every part of the system. Whereas for the other ones, so you need a receiving and a starting Stargate, right? So will actually I eventually be able to build these ancient Stargates myself, because they seem to be a lot more powerful than the regular ones?
Right now, the technology isn't in the game, though we could unlock it. We're generally not opposed to unlocking absurdly powerful things in the very late game, because at that point you've probably won and it's probably just fun. But right now the unlock isn't there.
All right. Question. So the Imperials are in the public build now? Is a question by Solid Smoke. Yes, they definitely are. So since the Stargate update, which launched yesterday.
Yesterday, yeah.
Exactly. So
both
it's
them and the Fede.
And the Fede. Yes, that's something worth mentioning as well. We're gonna have a look at the Fede, or at least at some of the unique features they use a bit later on. They're also quite interesting. So it's not just that these factions have been unlocked. It's like, with the Stargate and for the Fede with the mercenary system, they also have received the features that make them, unique and make them play very differently from the other races. So one thing I quite like is that for the Imperials, it's not just that that you start with this ancient Stargate, that's very good, but you also get quick access to the Stargate technology to build them yourselves, and I think that also means you get a leg up in mid game. It's not just early game where you're a lot faster to expand.
Yeah, this is something that we're actually we're planning on playing with more. So the patch I'm working on right now is it's going to add the Gremac distortion fields, and they're going to have a similar kind of behavior with their cloaking device, where for anyone else the cloaking device is a relatively late game tech, but they'll get a leg up on it. I'm not sure if they'll start with it, but they'll start like the Ashtar Imperials do, with a big tech boost. Internally now we're calling these things codexes. When you start with some kind of leg up on a technology, we're thinking there will probably be some codexes that you can discover through in-game events that may give you a leg up on one kind of late game tech or another. So it won't all be canned starting condition stuff. Some of it will actually be, you discover ancient artifacts on some system that perhaps was guarded by some sort of monster or whatever else, and then maybe you'll get the codex for super dreadnoughts, which also are something we can tease that's on their way.
That sounds really interesting. Actually, that would be great to have those kinds of systems into the game. So in the meantime, I've actually started my attack on the Gremac Marauder base. So we're gonna attack them. They know that we're stronger, so they actually,
Or are they trying to pay you off?
They're trying to pay me off, which honestly I don't really need the money, and I quite want the planet. So
yeah, that's a very nice planet.
On top of that, I mean, lore-wise, the Gremac.
You're not friends.
No, exactly. So the Gremac and the Ashdars are not at all friends. So it makes sense that we would attack a slave colony they have.
They're slimy, so they'll try and talk their way out of it as best as they possibly can if they know they're going to lose.
So we're going into the attack, or actually they're attacking us in the system. So we have a large fleet right here. Sven is going to show up for you, with a bit of delay. But we have a lot of transports as well, because I know they like to garrison their planets quite well.
Yes, and because they've attacked you, they're attacking your transport fleet, so you're going to have to defend it from... this is a not particularly impressive force of marauders. They used to be much more intimidating, but...
So did you nerf them over there?
I did. I nerfed them. It looks to me, if this is the game you've played honestly, without using the cheat keys, it looks like I nerfed them perhaps a bit too hard.
So yeah, they are having a hard time like this. Let's see what they're gonna do.
They're gonna get slaughtered.
Well, that was the first. So Sven, while we're discussing this, could you tell us a bit of everything that has changed so far? Since we started early access. Obviously, we are you release quite a lot of patch. I think weekly patches overall, with new content, new stuff. So what are the biggest changes so far since early access release?
Yeah, so the big line items, the strategic zoom feature was the first big one. We added in the ability to zoom in and out of the star map, which almost as a side effect of that, we've started experimenting with larger map sizes. So we've uncapped the number of stars in the galaxy. So if you want to try playing a game with an absurd number of stars, you can. I don't know how many people have actually finished games with these absurd numbers of stars, but this is one of those things where oh dear, my throat's acting up.
No worries.
So this is one of those things where there was a lot of questions on the forum, just over and over again. Can we get more stars? And the truth is, the engine can generally handle it. The gameplay isn't really designed for much more than, I think, 120 stars is about as big as you can comfortably go. But if you want to take the engine up to 500 stars and have a game that will last forever, you can. And people have, and it appears to work with some small latency. Okay, so that's I'm getting distracted from the main question. The big features were the strategic zoom, which went in October, I think. Then there were a whole number of new diplomatic interactions, where the AIs can form alliances with you. You can now win the game by allying with AIs, so you don't necessarily have to do it by conquest. You can now win the game through the Galactic Council victory condition. So if you and your allies just control a strong majority of the races in the game, or of the population in the game, you'll just win flat out. We've added in the most recent patch, the Fede mercenary exchange. So the Fede in particular, and now any race that is an ally with the Fede has the ability to. And we cleaned up the buttons on the slave, liberate, and enslave and so on actions. So I'm I'm having a hard time just listing easily all of it. There's a lot. There's quite a lot. A lot of new sort of flavor to the galaxy. A lot of new.
So what's been your personal
variety.
favorite of all those changes?
I mean, it made me miserable as I was putting it together because I didn't like the way the stars were looking at certain resolutions and so on, and I got a bit obsessive about it. But now that I step back from it, I really do quite like the way the zoom works, particularly when you zoom all the way in. I got a little silly and I changed the size of the planet so you can actually see, if you have a gas giant system with a small world, or a couple medium-sized worlds or whatever else, that's actually now reflected in the graphic of the little rotating stars. And I thought that was a nice detail. I feel like the galaxy is a little more I don't know, with some of these UI changes, you spend so long with a UI that's not quite where you want it to be, but you learn to live with it.
Right.
And every once in a while, you change something, and it's just like breath of fresh air. It's like, oh yes, this is the way it always really should have been. And it felt that way with the zoom feature.
All right, and I think for me personally, the zoom helps a lot for my, for the feeling of immersion into the game, being able to zoom in, see the planets up close, or at least see them spinning around the suns, and I think that's quite a nice feature. And I find myself zooming in and out quite a lot more than is actually useful.
Strictly necessary, yeah.
Yes.
Just because you're looking at the galaxy and you're seeing what's going on.
Exactly. So we conquered the Sirius system at the bottom right, and we need to think of what to do next. So diplomacy-wise, we've only made contact with 2 empires. We're actually still at war with the Gramic empires, so we could focus on that. They haven't hurt us that much yet. They have some cruisers in the area, so it's could be a good time to send my fleet that way.
Yeah, well, you've got a massive collection of ships here. You're going to roll over the Gramic. What? So what difficulty level are you playing on right now?
Honestly, I'm not 100% sure.
Because that's another thing that we added. We had some requests for harder difficulty levels, so we added the brutal level.
All right, it's not that one. I'm quite confident.
It's not brutal.
No.
Okay, that's good, because if it is, then something is really not working quite right here.
No, it's not. I mean, I also had the fortune of getting into an early alliance with the humans, so I didn't have a whole lot of threats to myself. That combined with the Stargate to get my early expansion going actually proved to be a nice combo, as it were.
Yeah. So did they ask you for that? Or did you initiate?
I think I initiated. I mean, they were the ones, after we first met, I think they were the ones who tried to be friendly initially. I was a bit hesitant, but they said, I think they offered, they wanted some rights for something, and then I needed my help, a bit of extra money. So I provided that.
Right.
We grew to like each other. I mean, they're not too much of a threat now. And I have a personal, preference
bias,
for
yes.
Bias. I like the humans.
Yes,
I like the ship design.
A bias in favor of humans.
And it war with the Gramic makes sense, obviously. So it's much harder playing as the Ashdar Imperials to be friends with the Gramic as soon as you encounter them. Because of the historical.
Yep, they'll be disinclined.
So one thing we can actually, have been doing right now. So I've been creating some ships at the very bottom of my empire at Harmless M, and with the Stargate, I can push them up to my capital, to Ashdar Prime, and from there I can easily get them all over the galaxy, or at least within range.
So that's another little joke. Are you aware of what's happened with some of these system names?
So we got Harmless M, we got Mincing W. I've seen a couple of we got Mazarop right here, so I've seen some community member names.
Yeah. So you're beginning to suspect where some of these names may come from. Jim needed a whole, or Ariok, I should call him, needed a whole new set of names when we expanded the size of the galaxies that you could create. And so he just went through the forums, and anyone who had a forum name that looked like it would make a reasonable star name got immortalized in the standard star list. Nice.
There's actually a question from Solid Smagan. So why did the newly built human ships look like they already have some dirt on them?
This is an excellent question. It would seem there's something about the human construction process that is not super clean. But yep, they definitely do start with dirt layers out there in their grimy asteroid belts. I admit I've gotten this question before, and I don't really have a terribly satisfying answer for it. I would bet that Ariok could come up with something, because he drew the art and he usually thinks these things through.
Alright, so our ships have been refitted and re-strengthened, so we now just need to pick a target. So with my, combat fleet of heavy cruisers, which are, I think, a bit outdated, but still, it's strength in numbers.
Yeah, you've got so many of those things.
Combined with a lot of transports or troop ships we can just invade somewhere, land, and take the whole thing over, and maybe even enslave some Gramics. Because I noticed in a previous update you added another feature for slaves that you can actually experiment on them.
Oh yes,
which to me sounds rather horrifying. I must admit.
It is rather horrifying. We don't get too specific about what exactly is happening, but there's a button with a little lab rat, and if you hit on it, you will get a bit of science. I mean, we added it largely for balance reasons because the Gremec have this ability to take slaves, and that's interesting, to go out and do slave raiding and come back with your slaves, but to what degree is it actually useful to the Gremec Empire? Slaves are not as useful as normal population because they don't produce research on their own. The Gremec science leader actually doesn't produce any research on his own, so the Gremec players were complaining on the forums about how they didn't have as many good options for teching up as other people, and so we thought, well, this would be on theme and is horrifying, which, well, they're the antagonist of the series, they should be a bit horrifying. So we stuck it in there, another button. You can now spend slaves for research.
Alright, so perhaps we're gonna be able to see a bit more if we manage to actually capture this planet. So one of the little things I also like about, the slave mechanic, which sounds a bit silly to talk about liking stuff when it comes to slavery, but is the fact that, when you conquer a planet that has slaves, you're not automatically liberate them. It's still your choice if you want to keep them as your slaves, just take over the slaves, as it were, or actually become the great liberator.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of it's a small thing, but it's, for me, those type of things add a lot to especially to the ones who prefer a bit of role playing the game they play.
Yeah, it's one that Jim talked me into, sort of for exactly that reason. It is an event to free the slaves, so it's a button that you need to click, and it's not like it's hugely hard for you as Emperor to do that once you've conquered the planet, but it is a thing that you do. It's not an automatic. That's a lot of ion beams.
Yep, taking the planet, destroying and actually they still have a lot of ground defenses. I was hoping to just invade and grab it, but I'm seeing now they have 16 tanks.
Oh, that's problematic.
And 5
militia. Well, you
militia.
could bomb it into the ground a bit. It's always an option.
I could. Let's drop some bombs there.
Yeah, I should upgrade these animations. It's just a little temporary red box. There should at the very least be little explosion things that come up here.
Alright, that's better. So we bombed it significantly, brought the numbers down, got rid of all the militia, got the numbers down to 12 tanks, so there's an 88% chance we will actually take it. Obviously we killed some civilians in the process and all of the planet infrastructure. But,
to a degree, you got fairly unlucky here. They may have technology that's making their tanks harder to kill. So you bombed it significantly, and unfortunately, the tanks are still there.
So actually, what was his name? Sathawk is saying that the ships of the humans are probably dirty because they're the only ones who are willing to properly test it before sending it out into space. That sounds reasonable.
Yeah. No, I'm also agreeing with the comment on the forums. Just from what I'm seeing here in Bart's game, it seems like the AI priorities are a bit off. I mean, they had 2 ships and 16 tanks. What were they thinking? They should have had a few more ships, clearly.
They are actually sending out 2 light cruisers to attack my system, which
is moderately annoying, but
yeah, I'm
sure you can handle it.
I need to get back. Do I want to get back? I probably want to split up my force. Since the invasion actually failed, I'm not sure if you caught
Oh, I
that.
didn't
But,
see. Yeah, well,
uh,
I mean, 12 tanks. That takes a bit of doing. I'm sure you killed some of them.
yeah, we I think in the next run, our chances
Yeah.
are a lot better. But it is an annoying delay. And it also means that for the poor people of the planet, they'll be under siege for another turn.
Which, honestly, as a game designer, is sort of exactly what you expect. If there's a major invasion force that's trying to take over another capital planet, the ground battle is not necessarily going to be trivial, particularly if there's a significant force of ground forces on the planet. You expect it to have to grind out over a turn or two, which means that if they had more of a fleet to come and relieve the planet, they might have a chance of relieving it before your ground invasion succeeded. Unfortunately, those 3 cruisers aren't going to cut it.
No, and we actually managed to take it in the second run, still having some of the slaves, as the Amphi slaves cannot be liberated. So what can I do with these, or are they already liberated now?
No, you can never liberate Enfi. This is something else that people protest. But if you go to the Enfi's racial trace, you'll see that they're the only race in the game that have this trait called servile. Servile, yes.
Right.
Basically, they've been slaves for so long that they have forgotten how to be anything else. So you can't liberate them. They're just going to keep on acting as slaves. You can abstain from sacrificing them, of course.
All right. So
And I think actually because you don't have slave collars, you may not be able to sacrifice them. But
Right, no.
but you're never going to have an Enfi scientist. All of that capacity for creativity has been successfully beaten out of them through thousands of years by their ruthless Gremac overlords.
Right. So that's another reason to pound those graphics. So when we're not gonna release them, we're just gonna take care of them. That's how we're gonna call it for the sake of
Okay, so yes, it's now the Enfi Protectorate, and perhaps eventually, after generations of enlightened rule, they will be able to.
I think you're overestimating the how enlightened my rule will be, but
So you split up your force.
yeah, needed to cover a bit more ground. I don't want to get my populace.
And they mass-produce destroyers in a last-ditch attempt to fight you off, which isn't going to work, but was at least a reasonable sort of response to being invaded by a huge fleet of Ashtar cruisers.
So we've talked a bit now about all the changes up until now. We're seeing some of them in action with the Stargates, which actually kind of changed the game quite a bit. What are you still planning up until release?
So as far as tactics and techs, I've said a little bit about the other races that are going to have a codex. So the Gremac and their cloaking field are the thing I'm working on right now. The Orson are also scheduled to have a whole collection of tactical trait revamps.
Right.
So their ability to right now we're calling it the bus bars, which is a engineering term from an old science fiction series that Jim really enjoyed, the Lensman series. But the basic idea is that they'll have the capacity to build ships that can have a few special abilities based on absorbing energy from enemy weapon fire. So they'll be able to do things like take the energy that's been directed at them and turn it into a special to either overload their own guns or boost their own shields. So that should give you a few more design choices when you're playing as Orson right now, who are not quite as interesting as we'd like them to be. Then, sort of more broadly in the diplomatic and event system, we have a few things coming in terms of special events. If you've been paying attention to the forums, you'll see that there's that there have been some teases for the Super Dreadnought graphic, and so there will be the capacity to run into a rogue AI-controlled ancient warship, which may start rampaging through your systems and causing trouble in the mid-game. There's going to be a similar rampage event, we think, with pirates. So there'll be a few more threats and hazards in the mid-game that are coming not necessarily from the other empires, but from special events in game. And as yes, I think I will give it a planet-destroying gun. I don't think I'm going to give it a system-destroying gun, just to respond to what I'm seeing in the Twitch feed.
Right. Okay, so that actually sounds still quite a list. So are you going to try and keep up these weekly updates then?
Yeah, I think it's been a nice ritual. It gets stuff out, and it always gives people a nice patch of new things to test. And we do certainly listen to the responses that we get on the news posts and on the forums. When people ask for particular little features, not infrequently we're able to sneak them in. So, last time there was a request for production carryover, which is a mechanic that matters if you play. Can matter if you've been playing the game a lot, particularly if you're getting into the late game and you're trying to optimize the production of a big hive world. So it's now possible for a hive world to complete even a couple of ships in a single turn.
All right.
If you have a really productive world and you just want to build nothing but destroyers, you can build a lot of destroyers. And I think that probably makes the Ural even stronger than they are right now, which,
the Ural pretty tough already, right? Currently,
yeah, the Ural are pretty tough
balanced.
already. I think everyone else needs to get their power level up closer to where the Ural are, rather than...
Right. Let's see. I thought, there was a suggestion by Solid Smoke. He said, I'd really wish for a hold fire button to make it easier to capture enemy ships. So right now, ships are automatically using the opportunity fire if they still can. Is that something that you've considered?
It is. And I go all the way back to Master of Orion 2, and there was a button there that you just if you clicked an additional time on a weapon, it would switch to being red, and when the weapon was red, it would never auto-fire. And I do think it would be good to add something like that. It's another one of these smaller features that if I can wrap my head around it, it's just an hour here or there to get into the game. And when people ask for it, I do listen. The odds aren't bad. You'll get something along these lines. I'll need to talk with Jim about the UI because anytime you mess with something like this, there's a chance you're going to hurt things more than you're going to help. But I think that's one where if I just add an extra multi-click handler that changes it to red, and red is just I'm disabling this weapon system, but I don't want it to auto-fire. That should work.
All right, so there's your answer, Solid Smoke. So, uh,
I'm not promising anything. But
no, of
I think
course.
it's games, right?
It's stuff that can be considered, if especially if they're good ideas, if they're well thought out, if they are in the spirit of the game design itself, right? I mean that's an important thing. Um, so it's definitely an opportunity. The other thing is, of course, we can't really put dates on any of these things by definition. So right now we're very much working towards getting it full release worthy, but of course getting it into full release will not mean the end of the development cycle for the game. So can you say anything about that? I mean, are there any plans for post release support wise or?
Yeah, I mean, I very much I was a big fan of Sword of the Stars, and I see it as a model in some ways, that this was a game where the initial release came out, and then there was just constant support in terms of DLC every year or so, and it lasted for like 4 years, didn't it? While they were constantly doing updates for Sword of the Stars.
I think so. Yes, about that long.
And it really grew beautifully. If you played that game at the end of its DLC cycle, it was very mature. It had a lot of different interesting features. There was a lot of depth there, and just the wealth of world building and polish that it managed to accumulate through being out and being constantly updated was really noticeable, and I feel made it a real classic. I'd like to get Stars and Shadow to a similar point eventually. Of course, that's all contingent on it selling well enough that we can actually make it to a few years worth of DLC. But we'll see. Cautious optimism.
So I'm gonna construct a couple of hover tanks to replenish some of the troops that so bravely fell during the assault on the Soviet system. And then we're gonna continue our attack. I think these guys, the Gremok, they've also been declared war in the meantime, but I think the Orthan, whom I haven't met yet in this particular game, but I got the message of the war declaration, so I think they're having a very tough time. So at this point I feel like it's more of a race to their colonies than it actually is a proper war.
Yeah, if they're being attacked on the other side by another race, then you're mopping up one bit, they're mopping up the other bit.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I mop up more than the
more
other guys
than yours can
do.
Yeah,
exactly. So let's head into the attack. Actually, I accidentally mixed a couple of colony ships in my invasion fleet, which is not. I mean, they do provide some militia with the invasion, but
yeah,
I don't think I should.
And those militia can die, which is tricky.
So if they die, the population on the colony ship essentially dies.
Is destroyed, and you will have to reload it, which is a problem. This is another little edge case where we've talked about things we might do to make this less potentially confusing. Because I think it makes sense that in an extreme sort of situation, if you have a colony ship and you get to a sparsely held enemy planet that you wanted to conquer yourself, you can't just have your colonists go down and fight their colonists on the ground, and whoever wins will end up with control of the colony. That was actually the premise of a few sci-fi short stories that I quite enjoyed. So it's a mechanic I think ought to be there, but then you get this issue where people have these big invasion fleets and they just have a few colony ships that are tagging along for whatever reason, and the colonists are auto-included, and it becomes an annoyance rather than a convenience.
Right. So yeah.
So
it's
there's
one
a lot
things.
of little features I might be able to add that would simplify that. Either just if there are real professional tank brigades, maybe the colonists don't don't want to automatically participate, though that's confusing, or if the colonists do participate and they do die in the process of participating, I think perhaps they should lose their colony ship. Because otherwise it's a little confusing that you have this colony ship that looks like a colony ship but can't actually colonize because it doesn't have any colonists on it.
So we actually have quite an interesting thing happening right here at the system of Achernar. I think that's how I'm supposed to pronounce it. But me and the Orthin are both one turn away from reaching the system, and we both want those planets. So that here we're already seeing how much of it it's become a race essentially. So that will be interesting to see.
Oh, is that an Orthin dreadnought?
No, there's a heavy cruiser, together with a couple of destroyers and a good bit of exploration vessels, which probably shouldn't be, having that many.
Should they have mass-produced their exploration vessels? Probably not. Okay, yes.
Or at least not, put them in a single fleet, I suppose. But it'd still be interesting to see who's going to be there first.
Yeah, I believe what will happen is they'll probably launch an attack, and you'll have the capacity to intervene.
So if I intervene, which I indeed have the ability to do so, does that, equal a declaration of war?
Yes, this is something that we really need to fix. So you want to talk about features we'd like to add, and I'm not sure when exactly this will go in, pre or post release. This is the sort of situation where you should be able to hit a third button, that is, talk to the Orthin Emperor about this particular awkward little situation. Action, and it should bring up the diplomacy screen, and you should be able to say things like, leave these planets alone, space bug, this is my prey, I have the bigger fleet. And he can either say, well, all right, that seems reasonable, or no thank you. Or perhaps you can offer to assist him against the Gremak and say, we appear to have a common enemy here. Why don't I help you take out these planetary defenses? And then you could gain some influence. But he would end up with the planets. So there's some little hooks of that sort that I think would be fun to add in situations like this. And we just about have all the right buttons for it. It's just a question of one more little button in that intervene screen that pops you up into a diplomacy thing with a few different choices. But yeah, that's the kind of system that realistically I think is gonna probably isn't gonna reach full maturity until post-release.
Sure. Alright, in the meantime, actually, I forgot to garrison one of my newly acquired planets, so they revolted and reverted back to being Gramek, which is an error on my part.
Which is working as intended. Yep,
it is working as intended, that's good. So I'm sending back some troop ships to, launch a new invasion. I did take one of the planets. Probably the other one will be left for the Orthin then, since you can only launch one, invasion per turn. There is a revolt chance there, so I probably need to lower a couple of my guys who are in orbit. A couple of my tanks. There are actually humans living on this particular planet, so this wasn't a native Gramek planet at all.
Yeah, they may have conquered a human independent faction.
So, it's a good thing I didn't bomb them then, since, that would have caused some issues with my ally.
Yep.
And rightfully so, I should add. Auto resort at Osada, so that's nice.
So that's something else I think we need to nerf a little bit. Right now, the degree to which bombing actions can cause huge galaxy-wide morale problems is probably overdone.
We're actually getting a slight error message right there. Let's remove that.
What? No!
Yeah.
No. Alright, I think I know that bug. I think I need to fix that bug. That's one of the ones that doesn't.
That's what we see here, guys. It is, we're early access. Changes are bound to be made. It's not a fully final product yet, so there's a chance of this. Also, when you guys are playing, I mean, if you see them, report them. That would be nice. If you can record them, like I actually did right now, that's quite useful as well. But yeah, any way to report them, head on to the forums, send in the little report from the button directly is also nice, and then Sven will get it onto his to-do list basically.
Yeah, it's useful. It's very useful to have playtesters. Seems like you have some Twitch bugs.
That might be the case, yeah. So okay, we're taking back the planet. Are we? No, we're not. Such a shame.
So one of the balance changes that did sort of go in as a relatively minor change was that we added a whole, 3 or 4 new marginal planet types to the game.
All right.
So there's now an ocean world type, which is relatively inhospitable to everyone because it's just miles and miles of nothing but water. With yet more water that's compressed to ice in the core, so really no solid land whatsoever. And it's a planet type that gives some of the aquatic species a sort of marginal world that they can settle and do something with, because the Mars-like worlds are totally inhospitable to them. And I like the way it's sort of changed the diversity of the galaxy. We've also expanded the number of terrestrial marginal worlds. So there are steep worlds now and desert worlds, and it's
lots of smaller tweaks as well, and just quality of life stuff, but also some very nice when it comes to role-playing, immersion, or just making the galaxy feel very different. And
yeah, sort of anytime we can think of something small that we can do that adds a little bit of extra world building or interesting diversity to the galaxy, or some sort of gameplay quality of life thing, we as often as not just do it. And so there's a lot of smaller things like that in the patch notes. The planets are one of them. The special resources are another one. So there's now a whole number of different special resource types that you can discover around worlds. This is not revolutionary for a 4X, but it's something that we were lacking on the launch of early access, and we do in fact have now. So you can find gems, you can find rare earths, you can find ancient artifacts, and they all behave in more or less reasonable ways.
Right, actually what happened right here at the planet that we were competing for with the Orthan, they bombed all the Gramek that were living there, but they didn't bring a colony ship, whereas I did. So I basically...
Poor planning on the Orthan's part. There is actually logic in the AI that should stop them from doing that. Though they will still exterminate their enemy even if they don't have the colony ships, so perhaps that's what happened.
Well, I mean, I have seen them, rather annoyingly, I should add.
Come cruising in with huge invasion fleets and...
Yeah, but also, steal away some of the planets that I really had my eye on. They're like, oh my god, they're just beating me to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another one we would like to add a little diplomacy hook to. There's a situation that doesn't come up that infrequently, where you have a scout or something in a star system, and they come in with their colony ship, and they want to colonize a planet, and you have the option either of having your scout destroy their colony ship, intercepting them on their way to land, or just letting it go through. And again, this is a situation where it would be good if you could just call up the other emperor and be like, excuse me, I had my eye on the star system.
Yeah.
Withdraw or be destroyed.
I should wait a bit. So I rebuild a couple of tanks, so I got my invasion fleet, up to strength again, and I'm moving on to the next planet. So luckily the Orthan are just fighting the Gramic everywhere, so I'm like profiting a lot from their war, more than I'm fighting my own, really. Which is a good position to be in, I must say.
Well, you're rolling over this galaxy pretty quickly and efficiently, Bart.
Which is nice for a change. So, if any of you guys have any more questions right here for Sven, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm going to be actually. This might be a good time to pull out a bit, and because we are running out of time, and I also want to show you or just highlight the new faction in the race selection screen and talk about the feeding mechanic a bit. So I'm going to save this one. How do we save? That's fine. Because this was one of the new faction, and we've seen the Stargate in action, and how flexible it is and how useful it is. In early game, but also beyond that once you hit the Stargate tag, which you also have an advantage to. But about the Fede dance, so what makes them unique? What's their special gameplay mechanic, if you will?
I mean, it's really not the just one, because they do have perks around their ability to generate money and influence. Their homeworld starts with this resource called opal crystals, which gives them a constant source of influence in the early game, which is useful for diplomacy. They generate more money for each colonist, but they also have their mercenary exchange. So anytime they start a trade charter with, are you going to go all the way up to brutal?
I'm just,
I can see you thinking about that.
I'm not going to be winning that, but I just want to generate a galaxy.
Oh no, 300-star map. That will actually make it harder to find a mercenary exchange because it would take you forever to get to.
Well, I mean, to be honest, we're not going to be able to.
All right.
To get to that.
We're not going to be able to see the mercenary exchange.
No.
But yes, so if they start a trade agreement with someone, then their shadowy operatives create a contact with a mercenary company of that species, and they can then hire a mercenary ship from that species. So as the Fede, you can conquer the galaxy using Orson ships or using Ural ships. They would prefer not to do the dirty work. They would prefer just to get a really good economy going, which they're pretty good at doing, and then just use that to fund third-party hired ships.
So I mean, what's the? Is there any how does it compare to building your own ships? I mean, are they as good as the ships other factions can produce themselves?
Well, you don't have as much control over them, so you can't refit a mercenary. The size of a mercenary fleet is somewhat limited. That's the balancing we're still playing with. Right now, there's the mercenary companies are perhaps bigger than they ought to be, but yeah, it varies a bit on maps. They cost a lot more in terms of upkeep because mercenaries, you have to pay a significant amount every turn just to keep around. But generally, they'll often be about as strong as a real ship of another race. And if you let them go back to their mercenary company after your weapons tech has improved, when they're off the map, the ship will often be able to purchase upgrades for itself, and you can then rehire a improved version.
Right. Okay. So that means that you won't have nearly as much control over your fleet, but how long does it take to get them? Does it take as long as to actually build a new ship?
Well, it takes 3 turns for them to for them to fly to your capital world after you hire them. So it's quicker than building ships potentially. It's not instant, but I think it is significantly more flexible in terms of thinking, well, okay, I need to gear up for war here. Let's just take my huge cash reserve and turn it into a mercenary army.
Alright, so we got the new Fede artwork right here. Looking really lovely. I think this is all Jim's work, right? The 2D art for the game.
All Jim's work, yep.
It's
looking good.
It's all very good looking, so it's really nice to see more and more of that art finding its way in game and being used. So that's really good. So that's just a little bit of the Fede. Unfortunately, we couldn't show a whole lot more because, like I said, we are rapidly running out of time. So I'm gonna end it right here at this point. I'd like to thank you all for watching. Sven, thank you very much for joining us. If you have any further questions for Sven or for us, drop by in the Stars in Shadow forum on Steam or on the website itself, and we'll be sure to try and ask you. And in the meantime, the game is out in early access, so go buy it if you like what you saw right here, and leave your comments on the forums and let us know what you think. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you again next time. Goodbye.